Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this wonderful evening and this panel discussion for the exhibition Discoveries, co-curated by Bleacher, Sung-Hee's son, and Deepa Subramanian. Yes, that's me. Firstly, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Bleacher for having given me the chance to come on board this very iconic landmark event, PST Art, with its current year's tagline, which is Art and Science Collide. Well, it's not every day that you get a chance to collaborate in such a big way, and we take immense pride in getting on some of the exceptional talents on board this exhibition. We have about 8 participating artists, 4 of whom you've seen right in front of you. We have Alison Woods, we have Getty, we have Susan Moss, and Ibuki Kuramochi, and Vaughan will be joining us very shortly, and the rest of the artists will probably join us in spirit. What can I say? A little while ago, probably a few months ago, at the very same place where we are seated right now, I had a conversation on the myths and realities of digital art, and also talking about how physical art coexists with digital art with my genius friend Michael Masucci. But this conversation is going to definitely seal the fact that AI is in fact here to stay, which is exactly the point that we were trying to make in the earlier conversation. And in that sense, I think we've come a real full circle, but that's not the reason why I call this panel a full circle. Going back to the tagline, which is Art and Science Collide, where there's a lot of buzz about the word collide. People have been questioning why not intersect, why not make love, etc. But the fact of the matter is the collision of art and science is not something new. It's been around, it's been embedded in our lives, in our past lives, almost prehistoric, that it's always been there. But somewhere down the line, during the course of this crazy journey of our lives, the artists and the scientists separated ways, and the role of the artist and the role of the scientist became more pronounced as creative or scientific or theoretical, as you may want to call it. But that definitely does not mitigate the fact that scientists are artists and artists are definitely scientists. And in that sense, when you look at this tagline, Art and Science Collide, I think the highlight is more towards the responsibility of recreating the traditional forms of making art to sort of suit the current world that we live in. And I think that is primarily the goal of Catherine Fleming, the president and CEO of J. Paul Getty Museum, who's the brain behind this PST art. I think that has been her primary goal, and this event has definitely taken the Southern California by storm in the last couple of months. And I think if you perhaps Google PST, it's not going to take you to Pacific Standard Time anymore. It's going to possibly take you straight to the Getty Museum. And on that note, on that positive note, let's dive straight into this conversation, shall we? Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to welcome all of you to this wonderful evening. Thank you very much for joining us. And this panel discussion, this is the exhibition titled Discoveries, co-curated by Bleacher, Sung-Hee's son, and Deepa Subramanian. Yes, that's me. And I'd firstly like to take this opportunity to thank Om for having given me this opportunity to be part of this iconic landmark event, PST Art, by the J. Paul Getty Museum, with a current year's tagline, which is Art and Science Collide. I think there's something in the background. Oh, sorry, not that. Yeah, thank you. I thought that was an emergency because it wanted to. Art and Science Collide, yeah, it's not every day that we get an opportunity to collaborate at this level, and we take immense pride in getting some of the exceptional talents on board this exhibition. We have 8 participating artists, 4 of whom you're seeing right now in front of you. I heartily welcome and thank the distinguished panel of artists for joining us this evening. Thank you very much indeed. And for those of you who don't know me, first of all, I'd like to introduce Alison Woods, Gay Summerick, there's Ibuki, and Susan Voss. I think Philip Vaughan will be joining us in a short while. Harshit Agrawal may or may not FaceTime from India, not too sure. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Deepa Subramanian. I'm an art gallerist and a curator. I have the privilege of serving on the Santa Monica Arts Commission as one of the arts commissioners and also the current chair of the Public Arts Commission. And a while ago, probably a couple of months ago, in this very same place where we are seated right now, I had a conversation on the myths and realities of digital art and how digital art coexists with physical art, with the genius friend of mine, Michael Masucci. He's not here in this audience today, but I'm hoping he'll make it. But this conversation is going to seal the fact that AI is in fact here to stay. And this is exactly the point that Michael was trying to make the last time. And in that sense, I would say this has come a full circle. But that's not the reason I call this panel a full circle. Going back to the tagline, Art and Science Collide, there's been a lot of buzz about the word collide. A lot of people have been questioning why not intersect, why not make love, etc. But the fact of the matter is the collision of art and science is not a new phenomenon. It's been with us for a very, very long time. It's almost prehistoric and it's been embedded in our lives, in our past lives in many ways. So I think, what can I say? This is in the current context where art and science collide has been talked about in the PST arts context. The responsibility is to highlight the fact that we have to recreate the traditional art of making art to suit the current world that we live in. I think, and that's what the president and CEO of the J. Paul Getty Museum, Catherine Fleming, has aimed at. And I think this PST has taken the Southern California by storm in the last couple of months. I think if you Google PST, it will no longer take you to Pacific Standard Time. It will probably take you to the Getty Museum. I think that's the kind of impact that this event has had. And on that note, I'd like to start this conversation. Let's go in an alphabetical order. What do you say? Alison Woods, you're the first one. I have to say, what a brilliant installation right in front of me. I think it's, you simply cannot take your eyes off. There's so many elements to it. And the way, in your own words, it's a great amalgamation of science and art. And I think it's a perfect marriage between art and science. And Susan, Alison, I know that you have a technology background and you are in fact from the Silicon Valley, and there's always an element of technology in your art, and you also make sure that it is evident in the works that more than anything else. So my question to you is, given the current context, I mean, PST is one thing, but we all know that technology has taken over our lives in so many ways, more than we can imagine, and you've always been in a space where you have incorporated technology in your art. What is it that you had to do? Did you have to tweak it a bit or step up your game to sort of, embrace this new phenomenon that we are experiencing in terms of technology being mixed with art? Over to you, Alison.
Well, I started out working in the design industry of the San Francisco Bay Area and started a design firm that was probably the first design firm to use computer technology. So I worked on the version of Adobe Illustrator before it was WYSIWYG and before it was even released. So I've been working in that sector for a long time. When I transitioned over to being a fine artist, I thought, what is different about this era? What makes this era different from everything that preceded it? And from my point of view, oh, is my mic not working? Sorry. So what I felt was that this time in history is basically dominated by computer technology, and it's in everything. It changes finances, it changes how you write, how you think, how you interact. Every single thing is touched by computer technology, and so I determined that my work was going to be always touched by computer technology, and I would use it as both a tool and a hindrance. So computers are incredibly literal, they're very stiff, they're very boring, and it's hard to get them to make something that's not too predictable and that's interesting. And so I consider myself to be a cyborg, which is a cross between a human and a computer in my work, but I actively manipulate the computer, so I work digitally first to create a composition, and I try to break the computer. I don't try to let it do what it wants to do. You know, I used to get to the point where my computer would get so hot that it was ready to explode with stuff I would make it do. And then I paint it, but when I paint it so it's a real painting, and you can't just take something that's created digitally and make a good painting, and you can't even get a very satisfactory print out of a digital image. And so the whole exercise of getting a real painting from a digital image is in and of itself challenging. But it's also, my content is also about technology. So this particular piece is called Big Science 2, which references big science types of projects. And I do a lot of research on the internet, so I researched things like molecular forms, nanotechnology. I Googled technology and wealth. So there's actually a map showing the clusters of wealth created by technology centers as a part of the main painting. I also Google things like science fiction views of the future, and then I amalgamate all of these things into an image. And I don't like to have them be obvious images. They're in there so that they create sort of you get a sort of a sense of it, you know. So since science is kind of an abstract thing anyway, I work in abstraction so that you sort of get the sense of the science, but without having it quite so literally spelled out for you. That's.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Alison. I think that's you have to have a separate session on this. There's so much to learn, and thank you for your inputs. Moving on to Gay. Gay Sumerick is one of the most beloved artists of Los Angeles, and hey, your amazing abstractions. Typically urban coast meets sea in a very dreamlike quality. I think one of the most striking features of your work is light, the juxtaposition of light and color, which gives that kind of an atmosphere. I've been following your works for a while, Gay, but what I was interested in seeing, I was very curious to see how you transform your work by incorporating technology into it. In fact, when we had a couple of chats before the final show, Gay has actually created this work specifically for this PST art, but did not get a chance to see it. So I was very curious to see what the end product looks like. But when I saw it, I must say it was brilliant the way you have, created this grid. I'm going to let you talk about the work, but it has been a surprise, and very, very happy to see the new transformation from your regular genre work. My question to you, Gay, is How has this experience been, embracing technology in your form of art, which I think you may or may not have done in the past, but I'm glad that we're seeing that happen. And what do you have? What are your thought? What's your thought process for the now and for perhaps for the future?
Thank you, Deepa. So this work was created through my usual process, which is not high tech, it's very low tech. So I paint using palette knives and oil paint. And so for me, it has allowed me to deliver the work that is atmospheric and dreamlike. And as Deepa, you said, kind of abstracted, slightly abstracted. You can see the work behind me. I heard about the subject of art and science collide, and I think, well, for me, art and science have always been a part of my life, always. I had two careers for a while, one in biotechnology and human therapeutics, and research and development, and while at the same time, I had my art practice. And so I'm very much into researching and observing and asking questions. And so this work is really, it's kind of an extension of some of the previous work in that it is a description of what I see in my environment. My studio is right by LAX, and so I see the jets coming in and out, and so I started asking the questions, like, why are we seeing these repeatable flight paths over our Southland? And as I researched, I realized that there was a project that was using aviation navigation technology to sort of standardize these repeatable flight paths. And I asked the question, is that affecting our environment? Is that affecting society? Is that, what does that mean? And also, I noticed that the sky was changing. So like about 15 years ago, Om will remember I started asking these questions like, why are we having so much fog? What is going on? Usually we have June gloom and May gray, and then all of a sudden it was, July we had fog. What's that called? August, September, November, December. And so I started doing research on that. Is that related to the climate change? Are we changing the way that the fog behaves in our area? The research delivered lots of different information, some kind of saying that it had nothing to do with climate change, and some information saying that it had a lot to do with climate change. And I think it's important to always ask the questions and do the research. And so it came into this work for this exhibition. It was perfect. I mean, art and science it's engineered into my DNA, and so it was an exciting opportunity for which I'm very grateful. Thank you to the curators, and Sung-Hee and you, Deepa. So
That's great. Thank you, Kay. Yeah, one of the things that I noticed with PSD art is one of the biggest achievements of PSD art, I would say. It has achieved a lot, but one thing that stands out in my mind is the fact that it has changed the way the traditional artists perceive and view digital art. I think they don't look at it as a threat anymore. I mean, I wouldn't say it's less now, although I have to also say that there is still a lot of uncertainty shrouding the digital art space. But the fact that everyone is now aware that AI is here to stay, which is a message which is loud and clear, that I think artists from different genres have come to accept this fact and have readjusted their lives, I would say, to sort of embrace technology into their scheme of things in some way or the other. I think that's a heartening aspect of aspect which actually came out a lot in this PST art exhibitions across Southern California. Moving on to Ibuki. Ibuki is a very interesting multidisciplinary artist. She's primarily a performance artist and a painter, and she has gradually moved to the space of technology. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yes. So I think when COVID struck, I think all of us in some way held on to technology just to keep our sanity. But I think Ibuki found an opportunity there, and she digitalized her performance art into a digital collage. I think that's very interesting because one of the things that that came to my mind was performance art is very physical, and when you remove that physicality from your work and move it to a digital space, what was it like, and what is your how did it happen? Was it a smooth transition, or are you still working towards something bigger and better? I'd like to hear that from you, Ibuki.
Yeah, thank you, Deepa. So my approach is used to the physicality and the human body with digital manipulation to explore transformation of physicality in the digital space. So my work is rooted in the philosophy and the movement of Japanese Buto dance, created after World War II by Kazuo Ono and Tatsumi Hishikata. So which delves into the subconscious, primitive instincts, and the cultural identity. By deconstructing and reconstructing the body with digital technology, so I aim to question how the body transcends time and the space, and where the boundaries of self-identity lie. As you mentioned, I'm a performance artist, and the work currently on exhibiting so is created during the pandemic, coronavirus. So during the time, I experienced a loss of physicality. So because I couldn't do performance art anymore, so this was like largely due to my inability to perform in physical spaces. So it also provided an opportunity to explore my physicality in digital context. So this digital painting was created from the documentation of my physical performances through repeated experiments with Photoshop, expanding and layering. So the body constructed in this way takes on a kind of alien-like form that transcends the boundaries of gender, embodying a post-human identity. So in the space where the physical and the digital meet, a form of physicality emerges that is impossible in the real world, and I found it's very beautiful. And it is in the space that my physicality feels very much free. So that's my process.
That's awesome, Ibuki. I mean, the kind of work that you do is in fact, it's one of the genres that has actually changed the mindset of people from perceiving, art as in different forms. It's not just the 2 or 3 dimensional works that are considered art anymore. And I think your message, the social message, is also pretty loud and clear. Thank you and congratulations. And moving on, Susan. Susan is one. Susan doesn't need any introduction. Her abstractions are iconic. She uses the most unconventional colors, and yeah, you can see her works around the gallery right now.
Susan, what are your thoughts? I mean, you were from an era where you transforming from physical to a space where we are, where technology is playing a great role in our lives, where art is certainly not an exception. So, what are your thoughts on this? Because you have seen a lot more than us. So, we'd like to hear from you about. How you feel about embracing technology into your art. Susan.
Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it. Einstein said, and I gave this quote last time I talked, but it's so beautiful. The most beautiful emotion that we can experience is the mystical. That is the basis of all art and science. So I don't use technology in my art. I'm kind of backwards that way. I use the computer for other things like email and writing books. But for my art, I'm into oil paint and brushes. I have used technology. I started out doing huge spray paintings with guns, spray guns, masks, airbrush, and I did these huge, huge paintings. And that was my first show. And I got bronchitis after a while, and I tried everything. I went outside, I used the cartridge mask, and a lot of my work changes because of my health. Very simple. I can't do it anymore. So I couldn't paint for 6 months. And then, hi, Philip. and then when I went back, I decided to do something simpler, and I was staining canvases. I called it soft hard edge, where I would stain and mask off shapes and then wait for it to dry. And it took forever to dry, and I would take walks and it was a little tedious, but it did sell well to corporations. But I got bored with it, and so I discovered acrylic Roplex. Roplex is the base for all acrylics. It's made by Roman Haas. 55 of their employees got cancer from it, making it. But I was ordering it in big drums. And I started out with squeegees, and then I used cake decorating tools, and those were very well received. I got my first show in New York on Madison Avenue when I was 32 years old, and it pretty much sold out except for one painting, which I still have. And Lisa Dennison wanted to give me a show at the Guggenheim Museum. But at 32, I felt I was too young to show at the Guggenheim. I didn't want that kind of success right off the bat. I thought maybe when I'm 60, I could do that Guggenheim show. So I went back, and instead I did the Black Forest series. The Black Forest series is about my grandparents, Edith and Richard Hecht, who were very successful German people, Jewish, and started a furniture factory which grew to be the largest in Berlin. And they had a fantastic life. My mother was 18 years old when she had to come to the US because of Hitler. And my grandparents were carted off to Bergen-Belsen, where they were not fed. And they lasted a little over 2 years before they died of starvation and typhus. And so I wanted to do a series of paintings for them. And I did the Black Forest series. And when I got to 18, which is life in Hebrew, I got really sick. I had a lump in my neck, I couldn't breathe. I could hardly get up the stairs. I went to UCLA as an outpatient, and they said, if you keep using this material, you're going to have cancer. And there was a poster. I remember when I was driving to my studio, there was a big poster with skull and crossbones and said, do you have cancer? It was kind of like, I think maybe I'll stop using this material. And I was right to not take advantage of all the opportunities I had when I was 32, because I wouldn't be here talking to you today. I would have kept using the material probably like Eva Hess, who died at age 34 of plastics, because Mr. and Mrs. Big Collector wanted it, this museum wanted it, and so she kept using it, got a brain tumor and died. So I'm very lucky. And I did have a big collector, Robert Rowan, who said he would buy everything I did with Roplex, and I had to stop using it. And so I quit, and instead, I didn't know what to do. I just needed to detox and get well, and I wrote the book, Keep Your Breasts, Preventing Breast Cancer the Natural Way. But I found out that the body can heal cancer and precancer, which was just like cancer because I was really sick. So when I started again, I couldn't use paint. I'm a painter, and I couldn't use paint. So that was a real dilemma. I started doing drawings. At first, they were sketchbook, and then they got a little bigger. If you turn around, you can see my Earthslide drawings. That's the biggest I've ever done them. No, I've done them on 8-foot panels. I got a show after a year at Albright Knox Museum in Buffalo of 30 drawings, and it was a fantastic show. You walk in the museum, and there was all my small sketchbooks for Black Forest, and then went up to the crayon drawings, and then a whole glass-tin room of Earthslide drawings. And it was really great that I could find out, I could get depth, I could get movement, I could get gesture, I could get everything I usually want in a drawing. I could relate it to the earth, earthquakes, emotional earthquakes that I would have. I could do it all in a drawing. But when I went back, I wanted to learn how to use oils. And there was nothing I could use in the store as far as mediums. And so I started to research. And I found a company in Canada that makes organic flaxseed oil. And he visited my studio, and he found out how to make linseed oil. And you just put flaxseed oil, which is organic, cold pressed, in a dark room from the seed. You put it in a drum, and the solids fall out, and you have linseed oil. And then Bryce Martin, you probably know about Bryce Martin's work. He told me about a thinner called orange terpenes. Instead of turpentine, which is very, very cruel to the artist, orange terpenes is made from orange rinds. And so my studio's very fumeless, no fumes, smells beautiful. All day I can paint without hurting my health. And if anybody wants to know more about my materials or methods, I'd be glad to talk to them. But these paintings, like The Last Sunset, which is my interest in ecology and climate change, or Color Sphere, which is about color and atmosphere, this painting over here. I'm always thinking about the earth and my relation to it. Are there any questions?
Yeah, there'll be questions later.
Okay. Thank
Before
you.
I hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. That was very interesting, and it definitely there's a great deal of technology that's going on in your work. Don't say that it's not there. It's very much there, and we love your works. It's amazing. Thank you. Philip, you're here. Welcome back. Welcome. So Philip, what can I say? What a prolific career you've had. You still, I mean, it's your neon lights and your kinetic sculptures are iconic, and we all know about it. And this is what I was trying to say earlier, that digital art, a lot of people think that it happened yesterday, and it's just come into our lives today. But that is so untrue. There has been an army of people working relentlessly, not just in this part of the world, but across the globe, to bring digital art into the forefront. So there's been a huge history before it actually became this phenomena or movement that we see today as a tech world. And I can say for a fact that Philip is part of that history. And you've been here long enough to know how things have changed and how things are evolving even as we speak. So my question to you, Philip, is very similar to what I asked Alison. What is it that you had to do to change to be able to embrace the current tech buzz that's going on? I mean, it's I'm sure it's very different from what you've seen in your journey. I'm going to pass this way. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right? Yeah. I started out doing architecture mostly because my art teacher in English boarding school thought that that's what I should do. And I did about a year of that. And then I decided that I really wanted to go to art school. So I started out in art school as a painter initially, and doing sort of some sculpture also. And about the same time, I got introduced to a guy called Peter Wilson, who was the Pink Floyd's first light show guy. And I don't know if you know, but the Pink Floyd, when they were still in high school, they had a band, and they really couldn't play very well, but they had a light show, which was the state of the art in those days. So Peter was working with them, and he introduced me to basically sort of tinkering to make electronic controllers. But in those days, it was old telephone equipment. It was electromagnetic switches and that kind of thing, because this is before electronics. This is before computers. So we were trying to do things with light, partly because I had a teacher at Chelsea Art School, Anne Rees Mogg, who taught a color theory course. And she was a fantastic teacher. She got us really excited about color in general. And one of the things that she said to me was that if you take all the colors of paint, all the tubes of paint of all the different colors and mix them together, you get a sort of khaki, sort of dark brown, greenish sort of color. And if you take all the colors of light and mix them together, you get white. So it seemed to me that color in its light form, as against the reflected color that you get from paint, is a totally different animal, really. So I thought about it a little while, and I thought, well, it'd be interesting to try and make things with light rather than with reflected light, which is paint or all the different kinds of forms of color that you see. So the first thing, the piece I made was a rotating projector with 3 lights in red, green, and blue. And I dimmed each of these down through a series of resistors, basically. It was a very crude thing. and it had a motor that spun the thing around. Then, of course, you've got to get the electricity from the static to the rotating. And so I was doing this in the sculpture department, and I realized, pretty soon that this was the technology that I was using was actually sort of getting in the way. I mean, it was in a sense very complicated and difficult. And right about that time, I discovered electronics, because you used to be able to buy for the very first time little electronic integrated circuits, little black plastic squares with sort of legs coming out of them. And I got introduced to an electronic engineer, and we started working with dimming and sequencing of light using electronic controls and computers. And I never really sort of learned that much about the making of things in terms of computers and things. So I always work with a technologist, and the pieces that I've got here are sort of from that era. Use the same sort of technology from that era. The first big piece we built was in 1970. The South Bank in London had a gallery called the Hayward Gallery, and it was part of the new brutalist architecture sort of vein, and people had a very hard time finding this place. They knew it existed, but when you went down there, you looked and you couldn't find the entrance because it was on multiple levels. And so they said they wanted to do some sculptures that would sort of lead people towards the entrance. And I proposed a big neon tower that would respond to the weather. And that was, in those days, it was the people that were commissioning it were the Arts Council of Great Britain. And they had some really visionary people there. And I was just out of art school. So, I mean, it was a huge risk on their part to take, this young kid, and I had an electronic engineer, Peter Davey, who was working with me, and the idea of sort of giving a huge job to a young guy coming right out of our school was very very brave on their part, and so they gave us a guy called Theo Crosby, who founded Pentagram, a really famous South African architect, was working in London, and he sort of shepherded the whole process, and he took us through the permitting process, and he got a structural engineering company, um, and we sort of built this thing, or the thing got built. We just built the electronics basically for it, and that piece stood, I think, there for about 40 years or so. I mean, was a kind of landmark in London at the time. And I've been ever since that piece went up. I think it was commissioned, finally sort of were turned on about 1972. And so I've been working with the same kind of, the idea of using sort of technology and art ever since that time. And different sort of collaborators I've worked with over the years, but it always involved sort of electronics and light. And I do paint and draw as well. I make metal sculptures, because these big projects tend to take a kind of a lot of time, and you've got to kind of find a client to start if you're going to do a big piece. These sort of scale pieces I can do in my studio, but I really enjoy working with light and using the sort of somehow using electronics and the technology and working together with those pieces. It seems very interesting to me.
Thank you, Philip. That was really interesting. The final, I think we had three more artists, but Harshit Agrawal, who was supposed to FaceTime with us from India, I think he is, it's not happening. Oh, the techies, they go later.